What? You need to talk louder, so.
He wasn't actually saying anything. That might account for the volume. At least you're missing the good part.
See the.
What kind of pencil you use?
Create a color mega graphite from Austria.
You buy it at Blick's?
I think so, yeah. You can buy it. They have most
Keep your
every-
job.
That's right.
He's giving out samples afterwards.
Really?
Okay.
And that which means today's
Oh, yeah.
demonstration was reading pencil.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you don't. You know, you tried.
All right, well, what I have now here
Remember? Years ago.
is a very limited palette. It has cadmium yellow deep, cadmium red hue, and then viridian. So there's only 3 colors we're going to do this portrait with tonight, plus white and the medium. And the medium is the alkyd gel medium, so it's going to help dry the color faster. Probably only going to work with a couple brushes too. I'm going to work with maybe 3 or 4 brushes, but mostly brights. These are the bright brushes. And they're in size, different sizes, 14, 10, and then I don't know what size this one. Number 6, and then just a little filbert for detail. So we're going to work on that. I have a 16 by 16 square canvas. And that's it. So we can have a discussion as I paint along about anything that you guys would like to talk about. And I'm going to start with a bigger brush. And I'm going to block in all the shadow parts first. So before you paint, I pre-mixed the alkyd gel into some of the paint piles. So they're going to be a little bit more tacky already. And then we're going to do that also with the
You
white.
mean viscosity wise, not
Yeah,
color
they're
choice.
going to start to dry. They'll be a little bit stiffer. Because this has been sitting out now for about 40 minutes.
How long have you been working with the impasto?
Many years.
Viscosity. It is almost over.
Yeah, it's good. So I'm taking all 3 colors, looking at the shadow on cursor, and the shadow parts, I'm trying to make a kind of luminous kind of shadow. And it helps to have the white palette and the white canvas, so this way when you're mixing the colors, kind of no surprise of what you're going to get. So I'm going to start to block this in. And it just did, as you can see, I just did that pencil, a little bit of that pencil work, just to give you some idea of how big the head would be, but I'm not.
Anyone that's standing up may need sunglasses. I'm also an actor, so it calls upon a person to know what you look like. can't be embarrassed about it or change because colloquially, that's a fact,
So now, instead, we have the lighter, the highlight spots of the head, instead of focusing on them, to set the painting up right, I had all the shadows in the face. I'm not saying they were exactly the way I wanted, but instead of that, I want to fill up the canvas with some background right against the face to get that established so that when I do go into the lighter parts of the face, there is a better judgment for how light that actually needs to be, so I'll leave the white of the canvas for that.
Are you using any medium other than
Just that outfit. medium. So the more, like I always try to get my students to do this, cover the canvas, get the whole thing going first, so that you're not fighting against the white of the canvas. Well, the areas of the light where it needs to be are going to be very valuable. It's a roadmap. So you get all this blocked in. So that should be the first stage of the painting to get it to this point.
By a show of hands, how many in the audience are portrait painters or private?
Try.
29, 32. So about half of you have intended. One thing Joe's saying is, it's still about shape.
Well, most of my women look like George Washington, and the men like Jesus. So.
But I've seen you with those women, and you're right, they do. No, great likeness there. At least it's not Lincoln. Although there was that one woman in Jersey City who had a bit of facial hair. Not that I'm knocking.
I had a great aunt that really did look like George
Oh,
Washington.
yeah? That's what
From the early 1900s.
Is that the face or the body?
So now we're going back in for some increased darks.
And he's not just talking about my soul or sense of
Yeah.
humor.
And the shadows you're trying to cool. There we go.
Yeah, and then a little bit deeper in the valley. I'm more interested in the valley alone than any color in particular.
Oh, I'm good.
So you see, even in a short amount of time, if the shades are good, the likeness story is coming about on its own. just by the values of the correct shape. So that's an important lesson right there. Just keep going around, constantly trying to improve.
That's why I'm watching it through the back of the canvas, which is equivalent to the mirror reflection, which is how most of us know ourselves. You think you've got that one mark on the left side of your face, but it's really the right side, because you're used to seeing it.
Yeah, that's true.
So I can tell we have a room full of Twitter, Instagram people.
No, just take the photos.
It's actually a good thing to get used to. Although it's new and sometimes daunting, one of our compatriots, Charlie Hunter, is painting easels in Frederick for plein air competition. And he finished the painting and posted it on Facebook, and someone wanted to ready to commit to buying it instantly. So he put them in touch with the organization hosting the event and stayed and painted the same subject again, posted it again, sold that one, stayed again, sold that one. And that's when I said, okay, maybe I should pay more attention to these things, even though I feel like it's interrupting my artistic flow. And at Plein Air Easton, I did it on the next to last day. I took time out of a very sunny day to post my paintings on Facebook and ended up selling one.
There you go.
Over $2,000. So there was, I call that worth the time.
It works.
So what's interesting with this is that if you start to realize you don't need a big palette of colors to do a lot with those colors. So there's a lot here already. It's an interesting painting in itself, even at this stage. There's not a lot of colors there. Sometimes you see artists with a huge palette of color to do a portrait, but it's really not necessary.
You proved it today.
You get a lot of nice harmony in the painting as well. So far we only used really two brushes. We used the bright number 10 and then the bright number 6. So, and then we've only had 3 colors, we get this form. So drawing with the brush is a big deal. You know, I can't stress that enough. You really have to learn how to draw with the brush. Because we started with the pencil, as you can see, it disappears. And now we're dealing with all these big shapes. We've got this set up so now that it's kind of a roadmap. Easy to plot out where his the light spots or the highlights are on his face. So,
Why don't you give Lisa that other ticket and you can relax there.
be sure you get the leg, the lighter spots of your face. So I'm not going to do that yet. So I'm going to get into the grayer part. And we're going to make a gray for the beard by just neutralizing the green with the red. Kind of keeping it on the cooler side and a little bit of white to it. And we're going to just see how that
Was the red cadmium red light or medium?
cadmium red hue. Cad red hue.
It's medium, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of like a medium. So I'm going to establish the grays with that. If you see, everything that you're going to mix, as a rule of thumb, is always going to work really well because it's a small palette of colors. So I find, you know, showing this to my students, that the success of that takes a lot of stress off of doing the painting because you limit the amount of colors, and then everything is always working as far as mixtures. No matter what you do, it's not going to have something odd looking to put on the painting, it's always gonna work because you're only using the three colors, so the unity. Yet the variety, we always talk about painting unity and variety. You're getting enough variety, but you have unity because of limited palette.
And what do you feel, have you worked a similar combination with, like for example, ultramarine blue instead of the viridian?
I was using the cad red medium, yellow ochre, and sometimes black or ultramarine blue or cobalt blue. I like cobalt blue in a portrait too because it's friendly, it's not too strong of a blue. But then, I've known this from the past because I did a lot of studying in the Renaissance painting styles, because I did a lot of glazing in my formative years as an artist. So I knew that the green is always going to be beneficial to the flesh. So that's a cool enough color in the flesh tone mixture. So, you know, that does take care of the cooler side of the painting. So then, if you have that, you really don't need the blue because you can see how this functions really well without even blue in it. The blue is tricky because if you pick some stronger blues, you're going to have a problem trying to control it. But, like we always talk about in painting, the neutral tones that I'm putting in here now are really good for the painting as well. You get some of those neutral mixtures in there. And you kind of have anything that you can't describe as a true color mixture of, you know, as a primary or a secondary, and you're not so quite sure what it is. And as a rule of thumb, I tell the students that it isn't, that's a neutral color, because it's an indescribable color. You can't really place it in a certain area. So you see a lot of that, even in this area back here. It's kind of getting a lot of neutral tone to it. So then when we go to put some cleaner, purer color in the light areas, it's going to really make the painting pop. It'll have a lot of zing to it.
Has everybody here met Joe before? Yes, no? He just picked up another award at the American Impressionist Society. It is a pretty tough show to get into.
Where was that?
The American Impressionist Society. I did a painting in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and started off an interesting day. It was supposed to have demos going on there, and then it rained. A lot of people came out for Bushwick Arts in the park, but then there was a big attendance for my painting. And so I decided that I'm going to make the most of the day, and I did this plein air painting when I was there, and entitled it Bushwick. It's on my website. And that painting got in the National American Impressionist National Annual Show there. Thing about that is, you know, we have to control our thoughts about working and our positive outlook, because I could have, you know, that day could have been a useless day, but I made my mind up that I was going to turn it into something, and it really did work. So now I'm testing some lighter spots of color here to see where we're at. A couple tones down there. I have a brand new article coming out in the Plein Air magazine. It's going to be in the electronic version, and it has to do with the power of three in art. So So, in that, some of the ideas that I'm talking about and speaking about today are part of that process.
Better view.
One of the reason why I wrote the article to begin with was I had an experience with one of my students. I teach Saturday morning in my studio, and my student was really struggling that day, having a hard time doing his painting. His painting was getting kind of mundane, boring, and I had him for a couple of years, but I turned around and I said, Joe, you need to load your brush up, do 3 brush strokes, and go back for more paint. Then your painting will progress in a better way. So what happened was, he was midway through the class, and he started 3 brush strokes, and he did that for the rest of the class and turned that painting around to do a really wonderful painting. And I think a lot of the times for the intermediate or beginner students, maybe even advanced students, is not putting enough paint on the surface to get the painting really going. Students that saw Sargent doing a painting that remarked that he put out a lot of paint on the palette, and he used all the paint by the end of the painting. He put tons of paint on the palette and used it all by the end of the painting. So it's good to get a lot of paint on the surface, especially with the oil paint, to get it to flow better. You have better mixtures, more meaningful mass of paint on there. This way the surface can be varied. In the shadow parts, I did kind of a thinner application, but here in the lighter areas, you can really start to build it up. And I'm kind of doing that the 3 brush thing right now, kind of loading it up and getting some brush strokes on there, getting some paint on there, and keep going back to the palette. I always refer to the palette for my students as the well. Go back to the well and put more paint on the brush. If we think about the work of Lucian Freud, we see a tremendous amount of surface building. Of course, that was over a long period of time. We're doing ala prima today, meaning painting in one sitting. But when we see the Lucian Freud pieces, they're highly built up, many layers. And he basically said, you can watch some of the videos online, talks about working through that and making corrections and working through these massive blocks of color to get that buildup of the paint. It felt like if he didn't go through that search and that buildup, he wouldn't have achieved the paintings, the end result of those paintings the way that he wanted to. So he needed to go through that. He needed to put tons of paint on the surface, pushing around. Especially if you're more spontaneous paint, or you want to be more spontaneous looking painter with the brush strokes, you're going to have to put more paint on the surface. So you can see how I'm starting to build up the light in the paint, getting that going.
Just while you were talking about that, I thought of an analogy, it's kind of like pie crust.
Mm.
If you don't have enough pie crust and you develop holes when you're rolling the pie crust out, you're kind of sunk and you're going to be challenged to make any kind of a pie. But if you have enough dough or crust, you can always thin it out, move it around, pinch it, curl it, roll it.
Mm.
So if you've got more material on your surface, then it's at your whim to thin it out or thicken it up.
Right.
And the time to make that is early on. And the amount of paint on this is a sergeant, it's just incredible at times. I mean, I don't know what his thickest brush was, but or widest brush, but it looks like 2-4 inches at times on some of the tire.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, what I've learned over the years by teaching people in the workshops and everything is that the tendency is to put out a small amount of paint. And another artist, Soroya, also did the same kind of thing. He went to Chicago in the early turn of the century, last turn of the century, and he taught there in Chicago. And one of the big things that they noticed was he was trying to show a student how to paint with the paint, use more of the paint. And he took the entire tube and put it out onto the panel.
Speaking of Soroya, I think I was late to the game, but for anybody in the room that doesn't know about, do you know about the Soroya murals? Raise your hands if you don't.
Which one?
At the Hispanic Museum
Oh,
of New
yeah,
York.
yeah, yeah.
These incredible murals on display for free, and it's a must for every artist. And bring friends, even if they're not artists, they're gonna love it.
Is that on Park Avenue?
What?
On Park Avenue?
No, I think it's,
Isn't it
Oh.
museum?
no, it's more like, it's over Broadway or
153rd.
Amsterdam, and like,
153rd Street Station.
At the beginning of Washington Heights.
Yeah.
It used to be the
Is
American
it west
Indian.
side or east side?
West side.
West side, yeah, so you take the 1, 2, or 3 to get up there.
if anyone wants to get up for a second and have a peek at Joe's palette and look at the range of tones and colors that he's got, I mean, it really looks like you've got some gray, a little more red, a little less red. And if you can ask yourself those small questions, regardless of what you're working on, it can really ground you and bring, it can provide the answer. That's how you get in touch with the artist in you.
Kirk, when did you start your career as an artist?
I actually just ran across my first oil painting in my attic. I was 7 years old, between 6 and 7. My parents got me a paint kit because I was drawing on every notepad, phone pad. Back in the days before voice messaging, people wrote messages when they came in. And there were these various foam pads around the house, and I drew on everything, so maybe we should give them some supplies. So, I got a little exposure to oils when I was 7. Due to a change in family structure, there was a break for a few years before I revisited it. And probably, you want to call it the beginning of a career, sold a painting maybe when I was 14. There was this little character creature. It was a winged man, no arms but wings. kind of like a human pegasus. And there's probably a specific name in mythology for it, but I used to like to do pictures of them flying, usually with a full moon in the background. So I guess it coincided with my first nocturne. And I went to School of Visual Arts and was originally going to go to college for advertising because I had a very keen knack for conveying the benefits of things to people. And in what may be an ironic choice of integrity stances, Perrier had just come out. And the idea of selling water at $1 a bottle I found somewhat offensive. I felt like water's on the planet for everybody. And I felt like if I'm going into advertising, sooner or later someone's going to come through the door and say, look, we want you to sell water or air to people, and they're going to have to pay for it. And I felt that that wouldn't be a fair situation to put my employer in, that I was going to suddenly have this stance, not want to do that job. So I decided to go into illustration, which would relinquish me to, hey, we need a picture of a bottle with water droplets or whatever, you know. I can do that part, I can do the art part. And I studied illustration at the School of Visual Arts and didn't really grasp the notion of making a living as a fine artist. It wasn't, that seemed to be, from my perspective, people who came from families that had enough money that they could go just create art. And I didn't know that there was an avenue to pursue that. Unfortunately for me, the year I graduated school was also pretty much the cold cutoff for the use of illustration in almost all the industries I prepped for. So all the book illustrations and magazine illustrations, about 90 to 96% of that illustration was replaced with graphics and type and text. And I started to get opportunities that came up where people would ask for some unique piece of art. They'd get a call, hey, can you make us we need an 8-foot shark with light up red eyes, painted a fluorescent blue. Can you do that? Sure, we need it by Friday. So I'm making this giant sculpture, or we need a giant mural that looks normal in regular light, and then I found paint that behaved differently in fluorescent light. Black light. I found a whole bunch of interesting things for many years, and essentially made a career out of that. Never had to advertise. It expanded by itself. And also a friend asked me to do caricatures at a bar for their opening. Okay. Somebody asked me to do ice carving for an event, and we won the event. The sculpture was part of the competition. And I found myself dipping into, at this point, well over 340 mediums. And I loved it all. And then there was a kind of a screeching halt. Like suddenly finding a giant crane in the middle of Fifth Avenue, just hit the brakes and things tightened up a little. Let me know if there's anything you need to say about the portrait. Around the same time, I always wanted to paint outdoors, playing air painting, and the few attempts I took with acrylics weren't quite panning out the way I wanted it to. And I thought maybe I needed to change the scenery, so the first time I headed upstate New York, I went up to the mountains, only to find a hazy, gray, overcast, like 95-degree day. Wasn't working out. I didn't know that I didn't know the ease of application of oils in planning, and I discovered that in the early 90s. And then I started to discover plein air competitions. And in particular, plein air Easton, which was the biggest one. And that was, now would be the time to get the new ticket.
I did already.
What?
I did it already.
Before or now?
Yeah, before. I just bought a new one, because I knew it'd have to go out in 15 minutes, so I just got another one.
Yeah, but
Do you know
again,
what I mean?
okay, that was money I already put in the meter, the one.
We're helping the city.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Contribution.
I switched to the, two smaller brushes now. I'm using a bright number 6 and a number 2 filbert. And what I'm doing now is just going back and trying to enhance some of the darkest darks in the paint. I didn't put them in right in the beginning, but again, with the limited palette, I only have a couple options. I can't go to another color. And we did that on purpose. So what I'm doing is taking a lot of green, a little bit of the red, and using that as my darkest dark now. So I'll go back in and accentuate some of those spots. And I'm going to try to put his eyes in right now. Get the darkest parts for them.
Actually, you have some new people in the room, you want to scrape it off this diagram?
We're way ahead. I think I could do another one. Okay, now, just trying to get these darks in and under the eyebrow has a pretty dark shape there. So that also increased, look at it, brings out the eyes more. Trying to bring out some of that. And every time that you're reducing light in an area, I'm going to get this hair up here in the back. Every time that you're reducing light in an area, you are bringing more light to the lightest areas of the painting. So, kind of like very light touch on the paint that's already on the surface, because now we got a good amount of paint on there. And I'm looking to take advantage of increasing the depth. And again, when we talked that in the very beginning, vertical measurement, so I'm doing that again as I paint. I may bring up the mouth a little bit under the septum of the nose. So bring that up a little bit. I'm making that adjustment, coming across, getting that darker shape in there, seeing the width of it now. And you get better shapes that way. So you just keep the process of painting a portrait is, you know, a series of corrections. So that's what starts to happen. You start with something initially, like we did, very, very vague in the beginning. It depends how far you want the painting to be finished. Is the other trick. You want it to look looser, you want it to be highly finished. If we were to work on this for several days, you know, we could come back and refine it, but we don't have that luxury, so we have to get the sense of it, the sense of the light, the person, everything down in this one sitting, olive prima. That's why the olive prima is so much more difficult, you know, to do, is because you're trying to draw, you're trying to mix the colors and everything all in one sitting. But with enough practice, if you do it enough, you find that you can develop your speed, and before you know it, if you keep working on your drawing, separately from the painting. Your drawing skills will kind of merge with your painting skills. And then you get a growth in both areas at the same time. Now, underneath the neck, underneath the beard, I'm putting a really dark value here. Put that in, so that we can have some light coming, like hitting some of his chest area. So putting this depth in here to really make it feel like that light is underneath there. Also, one of the things that the portrait painters frequently do is merge background into the head in different areas and then paint back out from it. That's a good way of helping the head turn. It's actually a great way of helping the head turn like that, giving it some volume to go around. I think that everybody has a good angle to see it, right? Developing. Because I haven't
If
got
you need
up.
to move your chairs to get a better view, it's okay. You can,
I usually get up, but I'm not getting up for this painting really at all because I've been intensely painting it. So I can move around, like Kurt said, move around.
the one thing about this style of painting, whether it's a portrait or a figure, something that I heard early on and I've always embraced is, rather than it be a rigid, solid shape of a head or a body, is that when capturing the model, that it have a pulse. And sometimes that can end up, it can be a more refined, formal portrait. But like with a sergeant that works, that really works for you, it has a pulse. And the eye completes the picture based on lights, darks, and shapes. You get up close and you look, and there might be one large watt of a particular flesh tone dragged that creates half of a hand. And then another accent of a color. And that's not going to happen unless you do put paint on. And remember, it's a full tube of Gyurcsak paint on the canvas every time. You know, you might need one of those sturdier easels. Actually, where I had a student in one of my workshops up in the Adirondacks, and she works very heavy in pasta. Like on a 20 by 30 inch painting, she had the equivalent of 3 to 4 large tubes of paint. Like a full liter of paint, yeah. Somebody said, when will that dry? I said, somewhere in the late 2020s. And Joe was talking about putting the dark under the neck. If I suggested you get a 3 or 4 watt light bulb, you might say, well, what good is that? Like in this room, it would be almost imperceptible. In the backyard at night, or at a completely dark night, looking for something you drop next to a car, those 3 watts of light illuminate and create a whole perception in that area. So, if you're working on a painting, there's a face, there's some light, there's shadow, but as he focuses on this area, there's a whole lot that happens. That doesn't mean he needs to change this to his only view by the beard, because that could throw off how it works in the painting. But there's small transitions that happen. Like up in here, it's light, it's different color. I'm getting an interesting view because I'm looking through the back of the canvas.
Ah,
So even his brightest colors, the highest value colors, they're dark because they're blocking the canvas. So from this side, it actually looks like they got in trouble with the mob. No, you don't take a quick second to, just, you gotta see this from this view. Look from the back of the canvas. It's pretty severe. My mother had been struggling on a painting at one point. It was this seaside cottage, and she was trying to make it look sunnier. And she kept adding more white to the clouds and lightening up the blue in the sky. And I said that was somewhat irrelevant, because I think all of us have seen those really beautiful autumn or winter skies where there's bright sunlight on a building, but there's dark, dark clouds behind it, really rich. So in demonstrating for her, I said we could darken up this whole sky. And what it came down to was, on the house itself, is the relationship of the lit side to the shadowed side, and to any parts that get reflected light.
It's all, well, what Kirk is talking about is it's relative, because it's an interesting game that you play when you're painting, because you're putting down tones, and you, as I always say to the students, you're never going to know if the value, the light, the dark, the color is going to work for the painting until you put it onto the canvas next to the other color. You can talk about it all you want on the palette, but when you put it into action on the painting, there's where the adjustments have to be made. Some artists make adjustments right on the canvas, some artists make adjustments on the palette, or some artists do both. I tend to do it on the palette, but I've seen artists in demonstrations and painting making some of these value adjustments and color adjustments right on the painting, meaning adding more paint and either making it lighter, darker, cooler, warmer, right into the mixture of the paint that they already have in there. But if you keep adding more paint on, I think it works to the advantage of the painting. It seems scary in the beginning to do that kind of idea when you're not used to it, but the paint flowing actually helps the painting. Because when you see more established,
There we
what
go.
happened there? But I brought that down, and that adjustment is very good. Sometimes it takes a while to make all the adjustments. But he just really freaked me out when he did that. You know. I'll get it for that. Okay, so I'm just trying to bring in a little bit more of the air. That made a huge difference in the portrait. It's amazing how that one line could do so much. Bring it in the darks here on this side.
So Lisa, what was your favorite part so far?
Me?
The sandwich.
I promise not to bring her into it.
Yeah, but I
Now you
didn't
have
make that
noticed how he's
promise.
not talking much. Notice how he's not talking much, that's because I'm here.
Yeah,
You have
I
no
lost-
material.
That's okay, we can hear you talking.
I lost all my good family stories now that she showed up.
So hypothetically, there's this artist that lives in a state that's not New York, and he goes home and hypothetically his spouse or significant other may or may not have said, Joe said to me yesterday, he said, did you hear about the artist that got a new paint kit for his wife? And I said, hey, sounds like a good deal if you can swing it.
Actually, going back, my wife and I had a graphic illustration studio business in the beginning. That's how we started our life. She was in graphics for 25 years. And you see, I put that darker red in the nose on the right side here, and that's really sweet for the highlight. We just brought that out. So these little adjustments. He also has a lot of white on that bridge of that nose. So I have to build that up. And then I have to also, there's like a darker part there.
It's my soul.
It's a song. And if he doesn't move, I can get it. I'm going to put this dark in here. Again, every one of those little moves are significant in trying to obtain the likeness towards, this stage of the painting. And for the painting, you're getting more about the likeness now, because you've got all the matter, okay? And more of the likeness starting to come to the face. And, people that witnessed Sargent doing a portrait, the student said that, I always say this, probably said it here before, but it was like a fog lifting on the face. For a while, there was nothing too much going on, and then all of a sudden, the pieces started to really start to gel and come together, which is the exciting part about the everybody always wants to see the finish.
I actually started, I was painting last night to a band, a jazz fusion band playing, actually at an art gallery. I was painting them while they played, and I was using acrylics in an oil-like manner. And you do have to work quicker because when you're using acrylics thin, they dry. Not quite lightning fast, but pretty darn fast. And there's a lot of movement, and I'm allowing the music to drive and determine the feel of the painting. So a lot of the painting starts with scumbling and smearing color of whatever their first two tunes are. And I'm working towards a result that I've got a sense in my head. But just what Joe was talking about, even though I can't see it, I get the sense when he's talking about adding the red to counter a bright. There's also, if it's close to a pure red, it's going to have a high key value to it. So it's going to have a power, but it's going to offset the lighter tone. So what I did last night, a lot of work, especially around the drummer, moved the most of the trio. And at the end, getting that one dash on the cheek, on the nose, and taking off some of it with my finger. In fact, I still have paint on it. And it's kind of like what you're saying about Sargent, where it's that oomph that ends up tying in all of that groundwork, all of that discussion about light, tone, shadow, shade. One of the most famous forgers of famous artworks is from England, and he's out now. And for, I don't know if it's still ongoing or if it's off the air, but he had a TV show where he would bring in a professional artist, a novice artist, and a beginner. And he would teach them the techniques of one of the masters. And he would explain the technique and then have them each attempt it. So he'd take them out to a hillside and show them Monet or Van Gogh or something. And he had one episode on Sargent, which was quite fascinating, as he spoke about one of the most important things in getting a painting to look like that artist, again, that had been his career through the forgery, was a sergeant has to feel like a sergeant, and it can't be tentative. And he told the students he says, you gotta look at, you got a model come in, big staircase, flowing down, and he said, you mix up a large amount of color and you grab it and you attack the canvas. And a little, like you lean forward and you make that mark. And he says, it's not gonna happen if you do it like. And Joe said, coming out of the fog, that's the kind of thing, is you work up the thing and then you put that mark on with a lot of paint. Any questions? Come on, I know you go.
I do. Are you conscious about what lines you leave sharp edges and what lines you leave soft or thin?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes, you're always aware, so you're either trading off for sharp edges versus soft edges, but it's not much of a mystery to me as far as when I talk to people about painting. It's better that you have more soft edges than hard edges.
Could you snap a couple?
Oh, sure.
Why is that?
The realism of doing anything, a landscape or a still life or a portrait, if we're talking about representational, a lot of it depends on softer edges, because the eye, when the human eye is looking at perceived areas of interest, whatever they are, a figure, a still life, a mix, does not see all these edges and treatment the same. It's the untrained eye of a beginning student or even a viewer that doesn't really know how to paint, that tries to think that everything should be in focus and highly registered. But the magic of a painting is to have some parts really well defined and then other parts drop off. That's where I think
Focus?
the real mastery of
Yeah, I
the
don't want it on order.
painting develops for more advanced artists, because I think a lot of times.
Is that the case for drawing also?
I think so, yeah, the edge is very, the edge work is very important. Variation of loss of tension,
Toggle left or right.
and then that starts to build the paint. Just like here, we have higher rendering in the eyes and the nose, which is very important to the face. As the peripheral drops off, it's less important and less modeling in there. We think about the artist Nikolai Feshin, Russian painter, who was putting highly detailed faces, even very, very polished, smooth skin, as opposed to backgrounds or dress or hat or whatever to the face, very, very abstract. And that heightens the realism in the painting, which is interesting. There is a painting, the first time I realized this was the painting I saw that N.C. Wyatt did of himself with a background that's very abstract.
So your sharp edges should be used just very selectively.
Very selective. You see how I put this, I don't know if everybody could see that, but when I had all this depth for the neck and all that business going on, and then I wanted to really show that that's tucking under, the way that I introduce this light on the chest down here becomes very important. That little bit of light that really makes that area very interesting in the painting now. And I'm also going to put a little bit of the
One from the
white
back.
of his shirt showing up in different, I'm not going to go crazy, but I'm going to put some of that pure, cleaner white area. Not white right by itself, but white
That's good.
with a touch of green. Just a little bit of green. The green is interesting because it will show up, it's actually showing up as a blue note in here. It's all this optical business going on that really tricks the viewer. It actually appears blue, but it's not. I mean, it's crazy. And then that shadow line, let me just follow this up here. Let me move this dark down. Just little variations of color there. The lighter color really make that bottom part interesting to the painting. Kind of ties in.
It's beautiful.
What a handsome painting.
Wardrobe. Now, once you look at this and watch the difference, and take the red shirt off.
Pulls it down,
Mhm.
Yeah, totally different.
pulls it down.
All the reflections.
Now, that little bit of tone and reflected light, I'm not witnessing it, but whenever I've modeled, I'm always thinking about the painting from the other side. Just knowing that, first of all, this is pretty much a monochromatic, or I should say tonal. My beard is gray and white, there's not much brown in it. My skin's not particularly tan. And this, you could do this with 3 colors, but you might be able to do it with black, white, and just a little bit of red. And just like a background or what's to the side of a still life can affect the illumination, the bounce light, the fill light.
So I'm making it, that's a good point, thanks, Kurt. I'm making a more impasto or thick application on the forehead here, the light, again, because we want to accentuate that the light's coming from the top. And I'm just kind of like, see how I'm taking the brush, kind of like laying it like this instead of painting it, getting that thicker. And now the paint is really starting to stick. If we're painting for like 4 or 5 more hours on this, we really start getting some really nice texturing. That's starting to happen because it's thickening and semi thickness of it is generating more interesting brush strokes.
It's actually a good point he makes about the brush. That influences the calligraphy of your brush stroke. And do you have a spare brush? In particular, I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Hansen, a very accomplished plein air painter. And a majority of the essence of his work has to do with his calligraphy. And most people know to hold a brush like this, and then Joe was just talking about holding it from the side. You can also hold it like this, drag it from the opposite end. When you change the position of your tool, you change the effect it has with the paint. And it's something that every artist should get comfortable. It's an asset to you, so it would be a good thing to learn. But really, try it. It's even with pencils. Pencil, pen, brush. It's amazing what it can do for your work. And also, the more you get comfortable with these things, the more control you have over it. So like he's saying, when that paint gets thick, if you keep doing this, you're only moving the paint in a couple of directions. When you change the angle of that brush, you just added a whole nother tone to that note.
Now, what I'm doing at the end here for the hair, because you really can't get this effect any other way, is taking the back of the brush, especially with these finer hairs. Not even a palette knife will do this because it's just too.
Looking a little like Willie Nelson from here. Isn't it very?
Looking what?
That's my
Like
name.
Willie Nelson. The
Sorry.
portrait or me?
You.
Actually, I recently competed in an event called Bath County Plein Air in Bath County, Virginia, on the western side of the state. And there was somebody there that on day one just kept introducing me to her. Oh, you gotta come see Willie Nelson. She loves Willie Nelson. He has to.
There you go.
I put my hats in the car, but I was painting with my black western style.
Now, what were you smoking?
Actually, I wasn't, but
Oh.
I did meet a musician in California who said many years ago, he did work for Willie, and not that I had any doubts, but he said, all the rumors about the bus are true.
I think what Kurt said before about the variation on the palette is important because you realize, again, like if you come up towards the end here and see this, all the different varieties of mixtures from only those three colors, it's really starts to be like a really interesting thought about painting itself. It really challenges the whole idea of, just how many colors you really do need to make it come together. Is very interesting. I'm just looking around one more time here. And then I can take questions, or you can come up here and look at the palette. Look
What
at
are you
the
mixing to get that gray?
Age and stress.
Oh,
Trying to make a living as a fine artist.
taking these.
No day job. Oh, you had him. Oh, I'm sorry, I got my grade. I could reduce this by a bucket load.
Excuse me?
The gray is mostly the viridian and a little bit of the red and mostly on the greener side, and then you're just applying some white to it. And you're going to get a nice, really nice neutral there. There's a couple, well, what's interesting when you come up here, you see the pure colors on the outside, you'll see some tinted colors going towards the inside, then right the pot, right in the middle, is a lot of the neutrals, which is really valuable for the paint. The neutrals are